Hello friends, welcome back. I am Rajneesh and today we are going to continue our session with IPA. So here is the environment. This is IPA, this is IPA2. Both are working in multi-master replication mode. We have configured the replication in the previous videos and today our objective is to configure this IPA client. So let's start with it. Create one session with IPA, second session with IPA2, and the third session with my client. Okay, so first thing, let's recall what an IPA server is. IPA server is a collection of services, and these services start from the directory server, 389 directory server, which is the base for all, KDC, key distribution center, responsible for handling the principals and your passwords and password policies. K password is a service that provides you the ability to change the password. DNS is the bind or the name server. Memcache, this is Apache, provides you an admin interface that can be used to interact with IPA, and this is certification authority. And don't forget about NTP. This is the most important part. Your entire Kerberos realm, whatever laptop servers that you have in the Kerberos realm, should be using NTP server. The reason being, if you go out of sync as far as time is concerned, you may not be able to log in. So make sure that NTP service is running on all. Fine. Additionally, make sure that the specified rules are created in IP tables that allow access to the clients. So I think we already created a video and specified the rules that we had to allow from the networks. So additionally, I have added one more line just for TCP 53 because I tried to enroll a client and found that it was not able to update the DNS entries. So finally I figured out that it was IP tables rule. So I just added it to allow TCP port 53 to have access from any of the client in my network, because whenever your client is registering with the or enrolling with the IPA server, it may try to update the DNS records, and for that it's going to make use of TCP 53 port. Fine, let me see if it's there. TCP 53, yeah, it's there on both the IPA servers. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do on the client is yum install IPA client. It's already installed. Perfect. If it's not installed, you can just type the command yum install IPA client. Second is IPA-Client install -- help. You should understand what actually it does. So the domain, my domain is labs.local, that has been created, same as DNS domain. Server is the IPA server to which I have to enroll. Realm is your Kerberos realm. which is labs.local in capital. P principal. If you talk about Kerberos environment, everything is principal. It means a user is a principal, a service is a principal, and a server or host is also a principal. So Kerberos takes care of the credentials corresponding to all these entities. This is the password corresponding to the principals, and this is the principal that you are using to enroll your machine. So finally, in my example, I am going to use admin user principal. That will be used to connect to the IPA server and enroll the machine. Minus minus mk home dir. This is a good option. Let's talk about the LDAP environment where you have approximately hundreds of servers. What happens is, if you enable centralized authentication, user is able to log in, but his home directory needs to be created manually. But if you create a local user using user add command, that takes care of creating the home directory. Now, what we do by providing the option mk home dir, IPA client install sets up and configure the PAM so that it makes use of the module PAM underscore mk home dir, which says create the home directory of a user in case that is not present and copy the appropriate files from SCL to his home directory and set the appropriate permissions. So this lets the client know that in case the user tries to log in into the client and he doesn't have his home directory, that should be created. Hostname, name of this client, and that should be FQDN, not just the client one. It should be IPA-Client1.labs.local, including the domain name. NTP server that we have to use. In most of the cases, you'll be using IPA server as an NTP server. However, you can use Red Hats or any other NTP server in your environment if you have already configured that. Minus minus no NTP says do not configure NTP. It simply means that you have already configured NTP on your laptop or desktop and you don't want it to be modified. But for Kerberos environment, NTP is must. Whether it's IPA server or any different server doesn't matter. Configure SSH. Configure the client to use SSH features provided by IPA server, and configure SSHD. Open SSH server to use SSH features provided by IPA server. SSH trust DNS. It says that I am going to trust the SSH FS records which are present on the IPA server. I'll show you an example of what kind of SSH FP records are. I just click on IPA server. Here I can see that algorithm and fingerprints should match corresponding to the server that you are trying to SSH to. In case that fails, you will get a warning message that this is not the right server. Because what may happen is you may have a server with the IP address 192.168.1.10 example. You disconnect that server, replace it by a laptop, and you start running your services. So when you try to connect from the client to 192.168.1.10, you will fetch out the record from or SSH FP record from your IPA server, and as the public key or the fingerprints are not going to match, you will get a message on your SSH client that this is not the right server, and you can just not log in into it because you understand that the fingerprint is different. If you want to see the fingerprint, I'll show you. Okay, didn't ask because its public key is already present in known hosts. So if I am trying to log in into localhost or any other machine, here it shows me the fingerprint. Okay. Permit by disable permit all access and disable access rules. Enable DNS updates. This feature is utilized in the DHCP environment where your laptops or machines can dynamically get a different IP address. No KRB5 offline passwords. By default, IPA configures SSSD so that it caches your credentials. Why do we need to get it cached? You may come back from office, you are no more connected to the network and you need to log in into your laptop. In case your credentials are not cached, you will not be able to log in into it. So that's why caching is required for the credentials. If you want, you can just disable it. It simply means if you are in the network and you are connected to the IPA server, you can log in into it. Otherwise, you cannot log in into it. You can disable SSSD if you don't want it to be configured. Preserve the old configuration if possible. Uninstall if you want to just remove this server out of Kerberos stream, out of IPA environment. You can just type IPA-Client install -- uninstall. Okay, now let's try to install it. This is the option that we have to use, and other option that I'll be using is mkhomeder. So my home directory should be created. Okay, discovery was successful. What does it mean? It means that I am able to contact the DNS server. I know my domain is labs.local. I know my ream by checking out SRV records. I'll show you. Here are the txt record for Kerberos, which says the ream realm is labs.local and the ports that the Kerberos is using. SRV records are present, so effectively coordinating with the DNS server, it comes to know that yes, I am able to coordinate with this IPA server. So in case your discovery fails, the reason could be in your DNS name servers in etcresolve.conf, you may not have these IPA servers. Name servers should be your IPA servers when you are configuring it as a client for IPA. Please make sure about it. Click on it and say yes. Now this is the principle that it is going to use to contact the IPA server to log in into it and enroll the client. I am going to use the admin user. Going to take a few minutes. So here it says successfully enrolled in the IPA realm labs.local, created the IPA default.conf. Let's have a look into what it means. It says the global configuration, base DN, labs.local, realm, domain, server, XML RPC URI, that it interacts with the Apache to for the XML information. Okay, krb5.conf. This is the Kerberos client based configuration which says which is the default realm to use labs.local for any machine that's having the name labs.local or .labs.local. The realm is this one. And if we talk about the realm, the pk init anchor or the certificate is etc ipa.ca.crt. Forwardable tickets, DNS lookup RAIM, KDC fine. So fetch out the service records from the DNS server to fetch out on which port the Kerberos service is listening or the KDC is running. Ticket lifetime 24 hours. Okay, now sssd.conf. So this is actually your sssd.conf manual that I have opened. What is the objective of it? Okay, let me open this file. It says it configures the domain labs.local, cache credentials, important section. In case you want to log in into the laptop from remote locations where you are not connected to IPA server, you need to cache credentials and you need to store the password if offline. IPA domain ID provider, which is the service responsible for providing ID, authentication, access, change password, it's all IPA. Dynamic DNS, true. IPA server, fetch SRV record for this ipa.labs.local. TLS CA cert is this one, CA certificate. So services that it will take care of or the SSSD will take care of when I restart it. NSS, PAM and SSHD services will be restarted. Not SSHD service, but this SSS is going to interact with these three services. So the domains that we are going to use is labs.local. Closing it. DNS is updated, fine. If we go and refresh it, we'll see one more entry which is corresponding to IPA-Client, and SSH fingerprint records are created for it. A record is created for it. I didn't specify for PTR, so PTR is not created. If you want, you can create it manually. Okay. So here the client is configured completely. How do we make sure that it's working fine? Let me try to log in into the server. Or before that, I can see that this LDAP user is now present. Making sure that it's not present in etc password file. Yes, it's not present. Let me try to log in into it. Through my LDAP credentials, and it succeeded. So finally, and the other thing that you can see is, okay, come out of it. And I'll try to log in into it. Now my home directory was not present. Okay. Okay. Actually my home directory that I am using is home capital RCval. I delete it and try to create a new session. And here you see the home directory, because it was not created, it was not present, it was created. And now you can see that. How was it created? pam.d, and login, it makes use of system auth etc pam.d system auth, and in the session I can see, okay, pam underscore sss is taking care of it. So after you are done with the client based authentication, now IPA client 1 is known to IPA environment. You can log in into, so here you see I am able to log in into the IPA server without providing the credentials. Why? Because I have a Kerberos ticket for it. So I am now able to log in into any of the machines which is by default, any of the machines which is in Kerberos environment, but that can still be restricted, that we'll see. Second thing I would like to show you is how to configure sudo access on it. First of all, before configuring sudo, we need to understand which is the user or how it happens. First thing is coming onto the client. To the client, nss_switch.conf is a file where you specify where to fetch the database from. You won't find this line, so open the file /etc nss_switch.conf, come to the end, provide the file name which is sudoers. If you are talking about the sudoers database, from where should it be fetched? First is try to fetch it from the files, that is try to fetch it from /etc sudoers. If it's not found, try to fetch it from the LDAP database. Write and quit. If you are talking about services, net groups, they'll be fetched, and basically, and the most important thing is password, shadow and group, they are fetched using SSS. Quit. Now my client knows that I have to fetch the sudo rules first from the file /etc sudoers, and if it's not found there, try to find out the rules from the LDAP server. But where is the LDAP server? I have not yet specified. So there is a file /etc sudo ldap.conf. Open it. Okay, so provide the URI. It is going to be LDAP IPA.labs.local IPA2.labs.local. So which is the file I would like, okay, sorry, so the file name is sudo ldap.conf. Here what we are going to do is we are going to tell it connect to this IPA server over LDAP. How to connect? URL is this one, or URI is this one. SSL start TLS. We need to interact with the server using TLS protocol. Sudoers base. Okay. Before that, bind DN and bind PW. So these are the two things. Bind DN is the credentials that I'll use to connect or log in into the IPA server to fetch out the details of sudoers. So I forgot about what the name was, so let's try to search in the LDAP database. LDAP search -y protocol GSS API. I ran kinit admin to get my key. So now I have my ticket for admin user, and I'm going to use the same ticket to fetch the details from LDAP. So I'm using GSS API -y GSS API -b base DN DC equal to labs comma DC equal to local, and I need to search out only for the distinguished names. There is a huge list, so grep color -I sudo. So here I can see OU equal to sudoers, DC equal to labs comma DC equal to local. Okay, this is also an important thing. Sudoers base. So where do we have the sudo rules? They all are present under OU equal to sudoers, DC equal to labs comma DC equal to local. Coming on to the next thing, that is okay, UID equal to sudo CN sys accounts etc labs local. So this is the bind DN that we have to use to connect or log in into the IPA server and to fetch the sudo rules. I am not aware of the password, so let me reset the password. LDAP, am I disconnected? I believe so. One moment, my keys are not working. There is some other issue. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so LDAP password is the command that can be used to change the password of an entry. So how do I authenticate? Using GSS API, and I need to change the password of this account sudo, and capital S will say ask for the new password. Sudo 123 sudo 123. Fine. Password is sudo 123, and we save it. We have specified URI, make use of TLS, authenticate using this account and password, fetch the sudoers rules that must be present under OU equal to sudoers, And if you want to debug sudo sudoers debug, and I believe it should be in small URI, write and quit. Okay, let me switch to full screen. So we have saved it, and at the end we added a line sudoers debug to understand whether it's working fine or not. So I'll just type the command sudo su minus, and it says connect error. It was not able to contact the LDAP server. Okay, one reason I see is /etc IPA-CA.crt. vim/etc sudo ldap.conf, and we'll modify the file and we'll say that when you are interacting using TLS, make use of this certificate ca.crt. And here you see bind was okay, fine. So it should be ready, and it should be able to fetch the sudo rules from the LDAP server now. Let's test it out. Sudo su minus asks me for the password. I provided the password. It's scanning whether I have some kind of access through the user rcval or through my sudo user rcval, through the group rcval, or any kind of rule which says allow everyone to have access to it. So I didn't have access. It told me you are not in sudoers. Fine. Coming on to the policy sudo, we can create sudo commands, sudo command groups. So add a sudo rule and give it any name. Let's say for Rajneesh. You can give it any name according to your group or anything like that. Click on add. Now in this rule, or this rule can be assigned, here you say anything. You can assign it to multiple users, you can assign it to multiple groups, and you can specify the policies inside it. So first of all, sudo option, if you want to set particular options for the sudo, whether it should authenticate or ask for the credentials or not. Who can run or who can have access to these rules? Anyone? Very dangerous. Specified users and groups. I can add users here or groups here. Update. Okay, I'm going to search for the user rcval and add it. Now user rcval will be allowed access to this rule. Coming downstairs, access this host. So on which hosts should this user be allowed to run sudo commands? I say on any host, or you can specify a particular host. For example, coming on to adding a host, here we can see that IPA client 1 is there. You can add it. So now this user Arsival can run sudo only on this host. Which all commands can he run? You can have a selection of commands, or you can just allow any command. Deny, in case you want to specifically deny any command, it can be added here. As whom, let's say as anyone, you can get it restricted to a particular XYZ user or XYZ group. Run as group, any group, and we are done. Just click on update. Now if I try, in the previous command it said I am not allowed, I am not in sudo's file, and now if I run the same command, here you can see sudo host matched, run as user, all sudo commands. So effectively the command was allowed for me, and here I am root. Now you would like to remove this debugging messages so that they don't bother you much. Just disable debugging, and you type the command sudo su minus